She thought she could cut my lock and tow my Jeep, but when she realized it belonged to a federal task force, it was already too late. Backhand index pointing right, stay tuned, because this HOA Karen just learned the hard way. Some vehicles come with backup you don't mess with. Collision. Subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that prove karma always parks right where it belongs. Sport Utility Vehicle Balance Scale. It was one of those crisp Saturday mornings when the air smells faintly of dew and motor oil, the kind of morning that practically begs you to get your hands dirty. I was out in the driveway, coffee mug balanced on the hood, socket wrench in hand, fine-tuning my black Jeep Wrangler. That Jeep wasn't just a vehicle to me, it was a project, a statement, and honestly, a source of peace. Every nut and bolt had a story. Reinforced steel bumpers, heavy-duty suspension, tactical-grade off-road tires, all upgrades I'd installed myself. It looked ready for anything: muddy trails, flash floods, maybe even a small war. But here's the thing, the Jeep wasn't just mine in the personal sense. I'd recently started doing part-time technical support for a local police task force. My job wasn't on the front lines, but I maintained their off-road units, communications gear, and surveillance add-ons. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Because of that, the Jeep bore a small, easily missed badge near the rear plate, Federal Task Support Unit. That emblem wasn't for show, it meant the Jeep was registered under a federal fleet tag. Technically, it was a work vehicle. But since I was authorized to keep and maintain it at home, it sat proudly in my driveway, freshly waxed and ready for the next call. That morning, as I wiped a streak of oil off the fender, I felt someone watching me. You know that feeling, that prickly awareness that crawls up your neck. I looked up and saw her. Karen. Mid-50s, platinum blonde bob, pastel blouse that screamed neighborhood authority. She stood across the street, clutching her HOA clipboard like it was a sword. Her eyes darted from my Jeep to my house and back again. I gave her a polite nod. Big mistake. Karen didn't nod back. She squinted, like she was inspecting a crime scene. Now, I'd heard about Karen long before I met her. Every neighborhood has one, the self-appointed enforcer of community harmony. Around here, she was infamous. People whispered stories about her ticketing kids for sidewalk chalk and writing noise complaints about lawnmowers. She wasn't just on the HOA board, she was the HOA board, the type who took the term homeowners association as a personal mission from the heavens. I tried to brush it off. I mean, it's a car. In my driveway. On my property. What could she possibly say? I'd find out soon enough. A few minutes later, as I was tightening the last bolt, she crossed the street. Her heels clicked like gunfire against the pavement. She stopped a few feet from my Jeep and glared at it as if it had personally insulted her. "Excuse me," she began, voice clipped and sharp, "are you the owner of this vehicle?" I wiped my hands on a rag and said, "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you with something?" Karen pursed her lips. "This vehicle does not meet the aesthetic standards of our neighborhood. Matte paint, exposed hardware, and those," she gestured wildly toward the winch and reinforced bumper, "military-style modifications are not permitted under HOA regulations." I blinked, half expecting her to laugh. She didn't. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "this isn't a decoration. It's a work vehicle. I'm part of a federal task support unit. The Jeep's authorized." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care what kind of work you do. This is a residential area, not a military base. The bylaws are clear about vehicle appearances. We maintain a standard here." I could already feel my patience thinning. "With all due respect," I said, keeping my tone even, "the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over federally registered equipment." That did it. Her eyebrows shot up like I'd slapped her with a constitution. "Excuse me? Are you telling me the HOA doesn't have authority over a vehicle parked on your driveway?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied. Her nostrils flared. "We'll see about that." And with that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her house, muttering something about rules and enforcement. I watched her go, shaking my head. I'd dealt with bureaucrats before, but Karen was in a league of her own. I figured she'd stew for a while, maybe send a passive-aggressive letter, and then move on. I had no idea that she'd make it her personal mission to remove my Jeep. Later that evening, I told my wife about it. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, that woman," she said. "Didn't she once fine the Thompsons for having sunflowers that were too tall?" "That's the one," I said, smirking. We both laughed, but underneath it, I felt uneasy. Karen had that dangerous mix of ignorance and authority, the kind that makes people think they can do anything if they have a clipboard in hand. Over the next couple of days, I noticed her driving by more frequently. Sometimes she'd stop, pull over, and jot notes in her binder. Other times, she'd just sit in her car, staring at the Jeep like it was an eyesore she couldn't unsee. I even caught her taking pictures once, flash on, in broad daylight. When I walked outside, she sped off like she'd been caught robbing a bank. At that point, I figured it was all bark, no bite. But what I didn't know was that she'd already started writing up a formal violation. And in her mind, the wheels of justice were turning. That Jeep to her wasn't a vehicle, it was defiance. It was something she couldn't control. And when people like Karen feel powerless, they don't back down. They double down. I just didn't expect her next move to be so destructive. Because what started as a petty HOA complaint was about to turn into a federal-level fiasco. And all it took to set it off was one shiny black Jeep in the wrong driveway. The first official sign of trouble came 3 days later, tucked under my front doormat, a bright orange paper, laminated like it was meant for evidence. It wasn't a friendly note. It was a notice of violation from the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association. The heading read in all caps, "Vehicle in violation of HOA Code 9.2, unauthorized military-style modifications." And beneath it, in neat but aggressive handwriting, was Karen's signature, the kind where every letter looks like it's been stabbed into the paper. I laughed out loud at first. I mean, military-style modifications? It's not like I had rocket launchers mounted on the roof. The Jeep just looked strong. It had the kind of upgrades you'd expect from someone who drove off-road for work, not from someone playing soldier. Still, the language of the letter was serious. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in further enforcement actions, including potential vehicle impoundment or community fines. The thing that got me most wasn't the ridiculousness of the warning, it was the timing. 3 days. She didn't even wait a week before launching her little crusade. I walked back into the house, shaking my head. My wife, Jenna, was at the kitchen counter working on her laptop. "What's that?" she asked, seeing the orange paper. I slid it across to her. Karen's opening salvo. She skimmed it, then sighed. "Oh boy. Here we go. She's calling the Jeep a military-style vehicle. Says it doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetic." Jenna looked up at me, eyebrows raised. Does she think she's living in Beverly Hills? Half the neighborhood drives pickup trucks. Exactly, I said. But apparently, my Jeep crossed the line. Jenna chuckled, but her expression softened. "You know she's not going to stop, right?" "Yeah," I said, leaning against the counter. "But this isn't her lane. That Jeep's federally tagged. She has no authority." Jenna gave me that look, the one that says you're right, but this is going to get messy anyway. She was right. That evening, I decided to call Karen directly, get it over with before she started staging another neighborhood uprising. Her number was on every HOA letter, right under her name, Karen Whitmore, President, Maplewood Estates HOA. When she picked up, her voice had that customer service sweetness, the kind that hides steel underneath. "Maplewood Estates, this is Karen speaking." "Hi, Karen. This is Mark from 214 Willow Bend. I got your notice about my Jeep." "Oh yes," she said quickly, like she'd been waiting for this call. "That vehicle is in clear violation of HOA guidelines. Section 9.2 states that all vehicles must conform to the community's aesthetic standards." "Right," I said slowly. "And where exactly does it say tactical bumpers or all-terrain tires are against the rules?" "It falls under the clause about non-civilian design features." She said it like she was quoting scripture. "Non-civilian." I repeated, incredulous. "Karen, it's a Jeep, not a tank." Her voice tightened. "It has metal reinforcement. It's matte black. It's intimidating. We can't have residents feeling unsafe in their own neighborhood." I took a deep breath. "Karen, that Jeep is registered under the Federal Task Support Unit. I'm under contract with the local police department. I'm legally required to have it accessible at all times." Silence. "Then, I don't care what task force you're talking about. That doesn't make you exempt from community standards. If it's parked here, It falls under our authority. There it was, the word she loved most, authority. Karen, I said calmly, I'm trying to handle this politely. But you don't have jurisdiction over a federal vehicle. You can't impound it. You can't fine it. You can't even tow it. Her tone shifted, still polite, but colder now. We'll see about that, Mr. Daniels. The HOA enforces compliance. Either move the Jeep or we'll have it removed. And just like that, she hung up. I stared at my phone, equal parts annoyed and amused. I'd dealt with bureaucracy before, but Karen was something else entirely, a suburban dictator with a clipboard and a complex. Later that night, I told my neighbor, Paul, about it over the fence. He was an easygoing guy, retired firefighter, the kind of man who'd seen enough nonsense to spot it coming a mile away. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his beer. She's really trying to take your Jeep? Oh, she's gonna regret that. Didn't she try to fine the Parkers for having a birdbath once? Yeah, I said. I think she's trying to make an example out of me. Paul grinned. Well, you picked the wrong guy to mess with. That thing's federal. She's about to poke the wrong bear. I hoped he was exaggerating, but a part of me knew he wasn't. The next morning, I walked out to grab the paper and found Karen standing across the street again, phone in hand, snapping photos of my driveway. When she noticed me, she didn't look away, she waved the clipboard, like she was warning me. I smiled, gave her a little wave back, and went inside. That afternoon, another notice appeared, same orange paper, same signature, only this time it read, Final warning. Failure to comply will result in immediate enforcement actions. No dates. No appeals. Just enforcement. I crumpled it in my hand and muttered, You want enforcement, Karen? You'll get it. What I didn't know was that she was already planning her next move, one that would cross the line between petty HOA drama and an actual crime. And when that line got crossed, it wouldn't be me calling her about the rules. It would be the police. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of quiet, boring day when you think nothing could possibly go wrong. The sun was high, the air still, and I'd just returned from a supply run for work. I parked my truck along the curb and immediately noticed something off. The driveway gate, which I always kept locked, was slightly ajar. The padlock, the heavy-duty kind I bought after someone stole a package off my porch last year, was gone. Just gone. My stomach dropped. I walked closer, and there it was, lying in the grass like a broken promise, the lock sliced clean through. Someone had cut it. I pushed the gate open and stepped onto my driveway. The space where my Jeep had been parked was empty. Completely empty. At first, my brain refused to process it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked around again. No Jeep. Just tire tracks leading out to the street. I froze. Then my pulse spiked. I thought I'd been robbed. I dropped my bag and sprinted inside, grabbing my phone. My wife, Jenna, met me at the door, alarmed. What's wrong? She asked. It's gone, I said, breathless. The Jeep's gone. What do you mean gone? Someone cut the lock and took it. She stared at me for a moment, disbelief flashing across her face, before rushing to the window. Call the police. I was already dialing when my phone buzzed, an incoming call from my neighbor, Paul. I answered. Paul, my Jeep? Yeah, he interrupted, voice tight. I saw it. You're not gonna believe this. What happened? Karen. She was out there this morning with a tow truck. I stopped cold. A tow truck. Yep. She had a clipboard, waving it around like she owned the place. Said it was an HOA impound order. I thought it was weird, but I figured you knew. I gripped the phone tighter. Paul, did you record it? There was a pause, then, you bet I did. She was giving the driver directions, even told him to be careful not to scratch the paint like it was hers. I felt a mix of fury and disbelief wash over me. She hadn't just left another warning, she'd cut my lock and towed a federal vehicle. Send me that video, I said quickly. Please. Already on it, he replied. Oh, and she told the driver to take it to Thompson's towing yard. The one off Maple Street. I hung up and called the police immediately. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, my name is Mark Daniels. My vehicle was illegally towed from my private property. The person responsible doesn't have any legal authority to do so. Can you describe the vehicle, sir? It's a black Jeep Wrangler, registered under a federal task force. License plate number. I gave her the details. There was a pause. Then the dispatcher's tone shifted, suddenly formal, serious. Sir, did you say this vehicle is registered to a federal agency? That's correct, I said. One moment, please. I could hear typing, fast and urgent. Then she came back, voice low and deliberate. Mr. Daniels, that vehicle is flagged under a federal fleet listing. I need you to stay on scene. Officers are being dispatched right now. Dispatched? I repeated. Yes, sir. Do not attempt to retrieve the vehicle yourself. That's when it hit me. Karen hadn't just overstepped a boundary. She'd potentially committed a federal offense. Jenna, listening nearby, covered her mouth. Oh my God, Mark. She's in trouble. Yeah, I said, staring out the window toward Karen's house. She has no idea what she's done. Within 20 minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up to the curb. Blue lights flashed against the windows. Officers stepped out, calm but alert. One of them approached me. Mr. Daniels. That's me. He nodded. We received your call. Can you tell us exactly what happened? I explained everything: the lock, the missing Jeep, the HOA warnings, the call from Paul, the video evidence. I even showed them the HOA letter Karen had posted earlier that week. When I got to the part about the vehicle's registration, the officer raised his brows. So this Jeep is registered to a federal task support unit? Yes. I maintain it under a government contract. It's fully legal to be here. He exchanged a look with his partner, that silent kind of look that says, this just got serious. They asked to see the video Paul had sent. I played it on my phone. In it, Karen stood beside the tow truck, barking orders like a drill sergeant. Remove it carefully, she shouted in the recording. It's an HOA violation. The owner was warned twice. One of the officers let out a slow whistle. Well, that's pretty clear. Yeah, I said. She cut the lock herself. You can even see the bolt cutters in her hand when the camera pans. The officer nodded grimly. All right. We'll take it from here. Do you know where the tow company took it? Thompson's Towing Yard, I said. Off Maple. They called it in immediately. I could hear snippets of the dispatcher confirming details: tow lot located, vehicle ID matches, federal registry confirmed. Then the officer turned back to me. Sir, we're dispatching another unit to secure the vehicle. Do not contact the HOA president directly. We'll handle her. But I didn't have to. Because not even 15 minutes later, as I stood in my driveway talking to the officers, Karen came marching out of her house, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, all false confidence. What's going on here? She demanded, her tone more annoyed than afraid. Is this about the unauthorized vehicle? Because I already had that handled. The lead officer turned to her slowly. Ma'am, are you the one who ordered the tow? Karen smiled, clearly proud of herself. Of course. I'm the HOA president. It was parked in violation of community guidelines. The officer's face didn't change, but his tone did. Ma'am, that vehicle belongs to a federal task force. You had no authority to remove it. Karen blinked. Excuse me. You just authorized the unlawful seizure of government property. Her mouth fell open. That can't be right. It's just a car. Ma'am, the officer said flatly, you'll want to sit down for this. The next morning, the sound that woke me wasn't my alarm clock, it was the harsh metallic snap of my gate lock breaking. I shot up instantly, heart hammering in my chest. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a delivery truck bumping the fence, but then I heard her voice, that shrill, unmistakable voice I'd come to dread. This vehicle is being seized under HOA authority. I threw on my jacket, yanked open the front door, and froze. There, standing in my driveway, was Karen, gloves on, bolt cutters dangling from her hands, and 2 HOA board members standing nervously behind her. My Jeep was hooked up to a local tow truck, its chains tightening around the front axle. What the hell are you doing? I yelled, storming out. Karen turned, smug and self-assured. You were warned. This, she gestured to my Jeep, is an unauthorized commercial or tactical vehicle. The HOA board voted to have it removed. We've already approved a fine for non-compliance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You broke my lock to steal a car that isn't even yours. Her smirk deepened. It's not stealing if it violates neighborhood rules. Page 42, Section 9C, no unapproved vehicles. Maybe next time, read your covenants. Behind her, one of the board members looked pale. Karen, maybe we should wait. No, she snapped. We are taking action. This is exactly why our community has gone downhill. People think they can just do whatever they want. I stepped forward, pointing to the Jeep's insignia. Karen, that vehicle belongs to the police task force. It's registered federally. You're about 2 seconds away from committing a federal crime. Her confidence flickered for a split second, but she quickly masked it with her trademark arrogance. Nice try. I checked the plates myself. They're registered under your name. Because I maintain it. I shot back. It's issued for field service. You have no jurisdiction here. But Karen wasn't backing down. She motioned to the tow truck driver, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Go on, lift it. We'll store it at the HOA lot until he pays the removal fee. The driver hesitated. Ma'am, I don't think I can tow a vehicle like that without the owner's consent. Karen stepped right up to him, jabbing her clipboard in his direction. You're working under our authority. You'll get paid. Now do your job. By now, several neighbors had come out, phones recording. I could hear whispers from across the street. Is she serious? That's the guy who works with the police, right? She's going to regret this. I dialed my phone calmly, even though my blood was boiling. All right, Karen. You want to play HOA games? Let's see how that works out when federal property's involved. She laughed mockingly. Oh, please. Who are you gonna call? The police? Go ahead. You'll just embarrass yourself. I hit the call button, not for the local precinct, but for the direct line I had to the task force dispatch. This is my name. My unit vehicle is being illegally seized by a civilian party claiming HOA authority. I need verification on scene. Karen crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Oh, this is cute. You're pretending to be some kind of secret agent now? Karen, I said quietly, you just cut a federal lock and tried to order the seizure of a government vehicle. You have no idea how deep in you are right now. A few minutes passed, and the tension was unbearable. Karen's self-satisfied grin began to fade as the faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Neighbors stepped back, murmuring. The tow truck driver unhooked his chain slowly. Ma'am, I think I'm gonna hold off, Karen spun on him. Don't you dare. They can't do anything. This is private property under HOA jurisdiction. I looked her dead in the eye. Wrong. The second you cut that lock, this became a federal matter. Then, lights. Blue and red. 2 cruisers rolled up, followed by a black SUV with tinted windows. Karen stiffened. The officers stepped out calmly, their expressions unreadable. One of them approached me. Sir, we got your call. This the vehicle in question? Yes, officer, I said, keeping my voice even. These individuals attempted to tow it without authorization. The officer turned to Karen. Ma'am, can you explain why you're interfering with a marked task vehicle? Karen stammered, her voice suddenly less confident. I didn't know. It looked suspicious. It wasn't approved by the HOA. We were just trying to enforce community standards. The officer raised an eyebrow. You broke a lock, called a tow truck, and tried to seize a federal unit. That's destruction of property and attempted theft of government assets. That's not an HOA issue, that's a felony. Her clipboard fell from her hand. I didn't mean, he cut her off. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step back while we sort this out. You're lucky he called us instead of pressing charges. Karen turned to me, her voice trembling but still sharp with denial. You tricked me. You set me up. I couldn't help but laugh. Karen, you set yourself up the second you decided you were above the law. The tow truck driver packed up quickly, muttering something about never working for the HOA again. The board members disappeared one by one, leaving Karen standing there, red-faced and shaking. The officers took her statement, warned her of the potential charges, and told her she'd be hearing from the HOA's own legal team soon. By the time they left, my driveway was silent again, except for the sound of Karen's heels clacking away in defeat. That was the day she learned a hard truth. You can bully neighbors with your HOA power all you want. But you don't mess with a man whose toy Jeep has a badge on it. By the time the sun dipped behind the houses that evening, the entire neighborhood knew what had happened. Karen's little vehicle seizure operation had blown up bigger than a 4th of July firework. I couldn't even check my mail without a neighbor whispering, "Did she really try to tow a police jeep?" Or, "Man, that woman finally lost it." I figured the drama would die down in a few days, but I was wrong. The HOA board announced an emergency meeting for that Friday, and judging by the chatter in our community group chat, everyone knew exactly what it was about. The message from the HOA president, Tom, was unusually formal. All board members and residents are encouraged to attend this emergency session. Discussion: incident involving board member Karen and a possible violation of HOA property conduct. Translation: Karen's finally in trouble. When I arrived at the community clubhouse, the place was packed. Every chair was filled, and people were standing along the walls, phones ready to record. Karen sat at the front, arms crossed, lips tight. Her usual smugness was gone, replaced with a sour, defensive glare. She looked like a kid who'd been caught cheating on a test, except this time, the whole class was watching. Tom, the HOA president, a mild-mannered guy who usually avoided conflict, cleared his throat nervously and tapped his papers. "All right, everyone, let's begin. We're here to discuss the recent, incident involving board member Karen and resident Mr. Your last name." Karen immediately shot up. "Excuse me, Tom, but I should be allowed to explain myself first. There's been a lot of misinformation circulating online, and Tom raised his hand. "You'll have your turn to speak, Karen. But let's start by reviewing the facts." He nodded toward the treasurer, Linda, who stood and read from a printed document like a lawyer. On Wednesday morning, board member Karen, without official authorization or a signed vote, ordered a tow truck to remove a vehicle belonging to Mr. Your last name. The vehicle was locked behind a private gate, which she accessed by forcibly cutting the lock. There was a collective gasp. Linda continued, "The vehicle in question was a federally registered police task force Jeep. Local law enforcement responded, and Ms. Karen was issued a warning for tampering with government property." All eyes turned to Karen. She was visibly sweating now. "That's completely unfair," she blurted out. "The vehicle violated our aesthetic standards, Section 9C. It's literally written in the bylaws." I couldn't help myself. "Karen, you broke into my property with bolt cutters. That's not enforcement, that's vandalism." The room murmured in agreement. Someone from the back called out, "Yeah, Karen. We all saw the video." Her head snapped toward the crowd. "That video was taken out of context. I was just doing what needed to be done. You all complain that people don't follow rules, but when I actually enforce them," Tom cut her off again, this time with more authority. "Karen, enough. We reviewed the HOA regulations, and nowhere, I repeat nowhere, does it grant any board member the power to seize or tow property without prior approval or a court order." Karen's jaw tightened. "Then the rules are useless." That set off a wave of murmurs. Linda slammed her binder shut. "The rules are there to protect everyone, not to feed your ego." I could see Karen's eyes flick toward me, pure venom. "He's manipulating all of you. You think he's some kind of hero, but he's dangerous. He's got police connections, and now he's using them to make me look bad." I stood slowly. "Karen, I didn't have to make you look bad, you did that yourself. All I did was park my vehicle on my driveway. You turned it into a federal crime scene." The crowd chuckled, and Karen's face went beet red. Tom sighed. "Karen, based on everything we've reviewed, the board will be voting tonight on disciplinary action. This is serious. Your actions could have led to criminal charges against not only yourself, but the HOA as an entity." Karen's voice cracked. "You're not serious. You can't just—" "We can," Tom interrupted. "And we will." He looked to the other board members. "All in favor of removing Karen from the HOA board effective immediately, raise your hand." Every hand went up. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't process what was happening. "You're all making a mistake," she whispered. "I am this HOA." Linda crossed her arms. "Not anymore, you're not." Karen gathered her clipboard, the same one she'd waved at me days before, and stormed out of the room. The door slammed so hard the blinds shook. For a long moment, no one said a word. Then Tom turned to me. "Mr. Your last name, on behalf of the HNA, I want to formally apologize for what happened. That should never have occurred on our watch." I nodded. "I appreciate that, Tom. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to live in peace." He managed a small smile. "You've earned that much." As the meeting ended, neighbors came up one by one to shake my hand. Some apologized for not standing up to Karen sooner. Others thanked me for finally putting her in her place. One older gentleman chuckled. "I've lived here 15 years. I've seen her make grown men cry over mailbox colors. But this is the day she finally met her match." By the time I left, the clubhouse lights were dimming, and the neighborhood was unusually quiet, like the entire community had just exhaled for the first time in years. For the first time since moving in, I felt something new: respect. Not just from my neighbors, but from the HOA itself. And deep down, I knew one thing for sure. When you fight back smart, even the biggest HOA bully can't stand tall forever. The following week, the air in our neighborhood felt lighter, like a storm had finally passed. People actually smiled again when they walked their dogs. The gossip at the mailbox had shifted from complaints about lawn heights to laughter about the great Jeep incident. But of course, HNAs never stay quiet for long. 3 days after Karen's dramatic exit from the emergency meeting, a glossy, folded pamphlet appeared in everyone's mailbox. Across the front, in bold blue letters, it read, "A fresh start for the Willow Creek community." I opened it up, already half smiling. Inside was a carefully worded letter from Tom, the HOA president, and the newly restructured board. The first paragraph read like a corporate press release. "In light of recent misunderstandings regarding vehicle regulations, the HOA board has voted to clarify our community policies to ensure fairness, transparency, and respect for property rights moving forward." Translation: We're trying to clean up Karen's mess without admitting fault. The second page was what really caught my attention. Under the heading Vehicle Guidelines Update, it listed a few new clarifications. Residents may keep up to 2 personal or work-related vehicles visible from the street, as long as they do not obstruct traffic. Modifications for professional use, safety, or federal contracts will be exempt from prior approval. Only the HNA president or majority board vote may authorize property enforcement measures. I actually laughed out loud. They'd basically rewritten the bylaws because of me, or rather because of Karen. The next evening, I got a polite knock on the door. It was Tom, holding a clipboard and wearing the expression of a man walking on eggshells. "Hey, your name," he started, shifting awkwardly. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" I invited him in. He looked around, eyes catching on the framed photo of my Jeep from a recent off-road event. "Nice setup," he said, half grinning. "You know, I finally saw the badge up close on that Jeep. Didn't realize how official it looked." "Yeah," I said casually. Karen didn't either. He chuckled nervously, then sighed. "Listen, I just wanted to say, again, we're really sorry for what happened. The board, well, we kind of let Karen run wild. She bulldozed through decisions, and honestly, most of us just went along to avoid the drama." I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a dictatorship disguised as a community board." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Pretty much. But that's over now. We're implementing checks and balances. No more solo Karen power trips. We even added a resident complaint portal so people can report board abuse directly." That made me smile. "So basically, you're giving the neighborhood a way to Karen-proof itself." Tom laughed for the first time that night. "Yeah, something like that." He hesitated, then added, "Oh, and about the property damage. The HOA's insurance is covering your broken lock. You'll get a check by Friday." "Appreciate it," I said. "But what about Karen?" His face darkened a little. "She's not taking it well. She sent a 12-page email claiming we're conspiring against her. Apparently, she's trying to rally support to reclaim her position." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Let me guess, no one's buying it?" Tom shook his head. "Nope. Not after that video hit the community page. Half the neighborhood saw her cutting your lock like she was starring in a crime show. I smirked. Karma's got a funny way of broadcasting itself. Over the next week, life slowly returned to normal. My neighbors started stopping by more often, people who used to avoid me because Karen had labeled me a troublemaker. Now they wanted to hear the full story straight from me. One couple, the Johnsons, brought over a batch of cookies and said, "We've lived here 10 years, and we've never seen anyone stand up to her like that. You might have just saved this neighborhood." Saved it? I laughed. I just wanted to keep my Jeep parked. But as the days went by, I realized it had changed things. The HOA meetings became open forums where residents could actually speak without being shut down. New committees were forming: landscaping, neighborhood watch, even a community fun night team that planned to host a barbecue at the park. It was the kind of neighborly spirit we hadn't seen in years. Still, part of me knew Karen wasn't gone for good. People like her don't fade quietly, they regroup. And sure enough, I didn't have to wait long for the next surprise. One morning, while checking my mail, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no signature, just one bold line in blocky handwriting: "Enjoy your power trip while it lasts. The HOA isn't done with you." I let out a slow sigh, shaking my head. "Of course," I muttered. "She's not done yet." I looked around the peaceful neighborhood, kids riding bikes, sprinklers spraying, dogs barking in yards, and couldn't help but smile. If Karen wanted another fight, she'd find out fast that I wasn't the same guy she thought she could push around. I had truth, law, and about half the neighborhood on my side now. And if she wanted to play dirty again, well, I still had friends who drove black SUVs with blue lights. That evening, I attended the first official HOA meeting since Karen's removal. Tom looked more confident now, addressing the residents with real leadership. "This board belongs to the community," he said proudly. "And from this day forward, no one person, not even a board member, can act above the rules." The crowd applauded. I glanced around, realizing that for the first time since moving in, I didn't feel like an outsider. Karen might have started a war over a Jeep, but in trying to control everything, she ended up uniting everyone against her. And as I walked home under the streetlights, I couldn't help but think, sometimes the best revenge isn't payback. It's peace. It took less than 2 weeks for Karen to try making her grand comeback. Honestly, I should have seen it coming. People like her don't stay quiet for long. When someone like Karen loses control, she doesn't reflect or apologize. No, she plans. She schemes. She waits for a new way to claw her way back to power. And in her mind, this neighborhood was her kingdom. She wasn't about to let some mechanic with a Jeep, her words, not mine, take that away. It all started with whispers. First, a few neighbors mentioned seeing Karen walking door to door, handing out flyers. Then someone posted a picture in the community group chat, a photo of Karen smiling stiffly beside a banner that read, "Take back Willow Creek, reinstate strong leadership." The caption underneath read, "She's back at it again, grimacing face." Apparently, she'd printed hundreds of flyers, each one containing her official statement about what really happened during the Jeep incident. She'd rewritten the whole story, painting herself as the victim, claiming she was tricked by me and set up by a corrupt HOA board influenced by outside law enforcement. According to her version, she was simply protecting community safety from a suspicious unmarked vehicle when she unintentionally damaged my property. Unintentionally. Sure. The best part? She even accused Tom, the HOA president, of colluding with me to undermine proper leadership for personal gain. It was classic Karen, dramatic, manipulative, and just unhinged enough to sound believable to the few neighbors who still feared her. The following weekend, the HOA scheduled its first official community barbecue and meet and greet, part of their new open and friendly initiative. Everyone was invited. Free food, music, kids' games, raffle prizes, the works. But what none of us knew was that Karen had plans of her own. The event started off great. The smell of burgers filled the air, kids ran around with water balloons, and Tom was actually smiling for once. I was helping a neighbor set up a canopy when I heard the murmuring start, that low, uneasy buzz that only means one thing: Karen's here. Sure enough, she strutted across the park in her signature pastel blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that same clipboard she seemed surgically attached to. A few neighbors froze mid-conversation. Others whispered and pulled out their phones. She made a beeline straight for the food table, the center of attention, and started passing out her flyers again, smiling like a politician at a parade. Tom spotted her and sighed. "You've got to be kidding me." Before he could reach her, Karen turned toward the crowd and raised her voice. "Fellow homeowners, I'm here today to speak for those of us who still believe in rules, order, and decency." The music faded as people turned to look. She continued, "We've let this community fall into chaos. Our bylaws are being ignored, our standards compromised, and all because of a few individuals who think they're above the system." I set down the canopy pole, crossed my arms, and just watched. Karen turned, pointing directly at me. "That man brought federal surveillance vehicles into our peaceful neighborhood. He disrespected our authority, embarrassed us publicly, and now the HOA is rewarding him for it." A few gasps. A few laughs. Mostly awkward silence. Tom stepped forward, calm but firm. "Karen, you're trespassing. You were removed from the board. This event is for residents to come together, not to listen to another one of your rants." Karen sneered. "Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you, Tom? To silence me again. To make everyone believe you're the hero. But I have proof," she waved a manila folder dramatically, "that the HOA board has been mishandling funds and covering up violations." People shifted uncomfortably. She opened the folder, pulling out a stack of printed spreadsheets, probably fake, and began waving them around. "This community deserves transparency," she shouted. "And I won't stop until justice is restored." That's when it happened. One of the neighbors, a mom named Rita, stepped forward and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Karen, nobody cares about your fake papers. You broke into someone's property and nearly got arrested. We all saw the video." The crowd erupted with laughter and murmurs. Karen froze, her confidence faltering. Then, another voice joined in. "Yeah, Karen. You nearly got the HOA sued. You don't get to talk about justice." Karen turned bright red. "This is harassment. You're all turning against me because of his lies." She jabbed a finger at me again. I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, I didn't say a word. You're doing all the talking yourself." Tom tried to de-escalate, but Karen was spiraling. "This isn't over," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You'll all regret siding with him." And with that, she snatched up her papers, spun on her heel, and stormed off, but not before tripping over a garden hose near the grill. She went down hard, right into a patch of freshly watered grass. The collective gasp turned into laughter. Even Tom couldn't hide a smirk. Karen scrambled up, soaked and furious, her papers ruined. She glared at me one last time, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you've won? You just wait. You'll see." She stomped off down the street, dripping water and humiliation with every step. After she left, the mood at the barbecue lightened instantly. Someone cranked up the music, and the kids went back to playing. Tom raised his burger like a toast. "To a Karen-free HOA." Everyone cheered. That night, as I walked home under the glow of porch lights, I couldn't help but shake my head. Karen's downfall wasn't dramatic fireworks or police sirens this time. It was something quieter, more poetic. She'd shown her true colors in front of everyone. And the thing about people like her? Once the illusion of control is gone, they crumble. As I pulled into my driveway, my Jeep glinting under the streetlight, I smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't making noise. It's standing tall, and letting them trip over their own lies. By the time the first patrol car rolled into our cul-de-sac, the situation had already escalated beyond anything I'd ever imagined. Karen was pacing in front of the Jeep, her phone in one hand and her clipboard in the other, shouting something about illegal parking and trespassing. The lock she'd cut was still dangling from the gate, snapped clean in half, and her bolt cutters gleamed in the grass beside it. The two officers stepped out, calm, composed, professional. The taller one, Officer Daniels, adjusted his sunglasses and gave the scene a once-over. "All right," he said evenly, "who called this in?" Karen practically leaped forward. "I did," she snapped, waving her clipboard like a badge. "This man is violating HOA regulations. He's parking a military-style vehicle on residential property without approval. I cut his lock because he was hiding it behind a fence, probably to avoid fines. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, leaning against my porch rail, watching the whole performance unfold. Daniels glanced at me, then back at Karen. "So, you cut his lock?" Karen blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yes. But only because, ma'am," the officer interrupted gently but firmly, "cutting someone's lock without permission is property damage. That's not an HOA issue, that's a potential crime." Her mouth fell open. "Excuse me? I'm the HOA president. I'm authorized to," the second officer, a younger woman named Ramirez, stepped forward and shook her head. "No, ma'am. HOA authority doesn't extend to private property destruction. You can't enter or alter someone else's property without their consent. That's trespassing and vandalism." Karen's face flushed red as she looked between the two officers, clearly not used to being challenged. "But he broke our rules. Look at that thing," she said, pointing dramatically at the Jeep. "It's matte black, it has reinforced panels, and that logo," she squinted, "that's not legal for civilians." That's when I decided to step in. "Actually," I said, walking down the steps, "that logo is legal, because it's official." Both officers turned toward me, and I handed over my ID card and credentials. Daniels examined it, his eyebrows lifting slightly as he read. Then he looked at the Jeep, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Wait a second, this vehicle's listed under the Regional Task Support Unit, isn't it?" I nodded. "Correct. I'm a certified mechanic under contract with them. The Jeep's registered to the department. I was doing maintenance this week, so it's parked here temporarily." The silence that followed was glorious. Karen's smug confidence evaporated like morning fog. "Task force," she stammered. "You mean, like police task force?" "Federal," I clarified with a small smile. Ramirez gave a low whistle. "Ma'am, you just damaged federal property." Karen's eyes went wide. Federal? No, I didn't know. He didn't say that." Daniels crossed his arms. "He didn't have to. You're not authorized to cut any locks, ma'am. And interfering with or damaging a federally owned vehicle, even accidentally, is a very serious matter." I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to backpedal. "I was just doing my duty as HOA president." "We have appearance standards, ma'am," Ramirez interrupted, her voice firm now. "Appearance standards don't override federal jurisdiction. You could be facing charges." The neighbors, who had been gathering quietly along the sidewalks, were now whispering to each other. A few had their phones out. I spotted old Mr. Jenkins across the street, shaking his head in disbelief and muttering, "She's really done it this time." Karen's voice cracked as she pleaded, "You can't arrest me for this. It's just a misunderstanding." Daniels looked at her evenly. "No one said anything about arrest yet. But we'll need to document the damage and file a report. We'll also have to notify the department that one of their vehicles was tampered with." That last part hit her like a ton of bricks. "Tampered with?" she echoed weakly. "Yes, ma'am," Ramirez said, pulling out a small camera. "We'll need pictures of the damaged gate and the cut lock for the report." Karen's hand shot up. No pictures. This is private property." "Then you shouldn't have entered it," Daniels replied calmly, snapping a few photos himself. "I couldn't help it," I smiled. Not a smug smile, but the kind of quiet, satisfied grin you get when the truth finally does the talking for you. Once the officers were done documenting, Daniels handed me back my ID and said, "We'll send a copy of the report to your department. I'll also file a local incident note in case your HOA attempts further action." "Appreciate that," I said. Karen stood frozen, gripping her clipboard like a life preserver. The weight of what she'd done was starting to settle on her shoulders. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she mumbled. "I just thought it was unauthorized." Daniels gave her a patient, almost sympathetic look. "Next time, ma'am, maybe make a call before cutting locks. Saves everyone a lot of trouble." When the officers finally left, the cul-de-sac felt quieter than ever. The crowd dispersed, murmuring. Karen gathered her clipboard, now looking like it weighed 50 pounds, and shuffled off toward her house without another word. I stood by the Jeep, watching her go, and let out a slow breath. The sunlight glinted off the hood, reflecting that small but unmistakable badge. Federal Task Support Unit. "Yeah, I thought you picked the wrong Jeep this time, Karen." The next morning, The neighborhood felt tense. You could almost taste the awkwardness in the air. Curtains twitched as I stepped out to grab the mail, and a few of the usual morning walkers suddenly found urgent reasons to turn around when they saw me. The rumor mill was clearly in overdrive, and I didn't need social media to know where it started. Karen's pristine white SUV wasn't in her driveway, which was odd. She never missed her morning patrols, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, pretending she was some kind of suburban sheriff. But by 10 a.m., her car came speeding into the cul-de-sac, brakes screeching slightly before she slammed it into park. Out she came, clutching a folder stuffed with papers. Her hair was a bit messier than usual, her lipstick uneven, a rare sight. She was flustered, desperate. She marched straight to my fence, glaring at the freshly replaced lock. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee, pretending to read the morning paper. "Mr. Peterson," she barked, her voice cracking slightly. "We need to talk about yesterday." I didn't look up right away. I let the silence drag just enough for her to squirm. Finally, I lowered the paper and said calmly, "Morning, Karen. I thought the police already explained everything." Her nostrils flared. They misunderstood. This is a private community matter, not a criminal one. The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night. We need to get this resolved before the situation escalates. I raised an eyebrow. Escalates? Into what? She hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I may have made a slight mistake in judgment. Cutting the lock wasn't exactly protocol. But you need to understand, the HOA's reputation is at stake here. There are people calling us tyrants on Nextdoor." I couldn't help but chuckle. "You don't say." Her face darkened. "It's not funny. Someone uploaded a video, one of your neighbors. The officers, the Jeep me. It already has over 3,000 views." "Sounds like a hit," I said, sipping my coffee. She shot me a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "This isn't a joke. The Regional HOA Association is asking for a formal report, and I've already been contacted by our legal committee." Now that made me put my cup down. "Legal committee?" She nodded rapidly. "They want to review whether my actions violated any statutes or caused undue liability exposure. I could lose my presidency over this." Her voice cracked on that last word, presidency. You'd think she was talking about the White House, not a suburban HOA board. "Karen," I said evenly, "you broke into private property, destroyed a lock, and tampered with a federal vehicle. Losing your HOA title is probably the least of your worries." Her eyes darted nervously around. "No one needs to mention the federal part," she hissed. "If that gets into the official report, the board could be disbanded. Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding." I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment far more than I should have. "So, let me get this straight. You want me to lie, to cover your mistake?" She stammered. "No. Not lie, just downplay it. Say the Jeep was an ordinary vehicle. Say you gave me permission to inspect it. That way, everyone saves face." I laughed outright. "Karen, the police already have documentation, photos, and a report sent to the federal department. You think a little HOA paperwork is going to erase that?" Her face went pale. "You told them." "I didn't need to. Officer Daniels knew exactly what that vehicle was." She sank a little, shoulders slumping. For a moment, she looked less like the self-appointed enforcer of the neighborhood and more like someone realizing they'd stepped into very deep water. Then she straightened abruptly, forcing her confidence back. "Well," she said, "you might think you've won, but this community doesn't look kindly on troublemakers. People don't like police activity in their neighborhood." "Funny," I replied, "they didn't seem to mind when you called them." That one hit home. She flinched. Before she could reply, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the local precinct. A short one: "Mr. Peterson, this is Officer Daniels. FYI, we've filed the report and sent a copy to your HOA board for record purposes. No further action needed unless they attempt retaliation. Stay safe." I looked up at Karen and smiled faintly. "Looks like your board's already getting that report." She froze, color draining from her face. "What? They sent it to the board?" I nodded. "Yup. Transparency's important in community matters, right? She took a shaky step backward, muttering under her breath. This can't be happening. I just wanted the Jeep gone. She turned and hurried back to her SUV, slamming the door harder than necessary. A few blinds shifted across the street. The neighbors had seen everything again. As she drove off, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Karen had spent years ruling this neighborhood like a petty dictator. Now her own rules, her own obsession with control, had finally turned on her. Later that afternoon, I took the Jeep for a drive down by the main road. It purred like a tiger, smooth, powerful, dependable. I pulled up near the lake, parked, and took a photo of it gleaming in the sun. Then I posted it online with a simple caption, "For the record, my Jeep's staying right where it belongs. And so am I." Within an hour, the post had 100 likes, most from my own neighbors. Karen, meanwhile, stayed invisible for days. No morning patrols. No angry memos. No clipped warning notices taped to mailboxes. For the first time in months, the neighborhood actually felt peaceful. But I knew better. Karen wasn't gone. She was regrouping. And if I'd learned anything about her by now, it was that she never accepted defeat quietly. The HOA's monthly meetings were usually a dull affair, half a dozen people sipping coffee and pretending to care about lawn lengths and mailbox paint colors. But this time, it was different. This time, it felt like a courtroom drama waiting to explode. By the time I arrived, the community center parking lot was packed. Cars lined both sides of the street, and small groups of neighbors whispered in corners. I could already tell, word of Karen's Jeep incident had spread like wildfire. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Folding chairs filled the room, every seat taken. At the front sat the HOA board, for members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and in the center, red-faced but trying to keep her composure, was Karen. Her usual air of superiority had cracks showing through. She clutched a stack of papers like a lifeline, tapping them nervously on the table. "Order, everyone," she called, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Let's begin. There are a few items of concern to discuss before we proceed with regular matters." The audience murmured. Everyone knew why they were there. Karen tried to start with routine announcements, garden club news, pool maintenance updates, the upcoming holiday potluck, but nobody cared. Finally, a voice from the back broke the silence. "Are we gonna talk about the Jeep or not?" The room erupted in quiet laughter. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of pink. She slammed her gavel down, too hard. "Yes, fine. We'll address the matter of the vehicle incident first." I folded my arms and leaned back. "Showtime." She straightened her papers, forcing a brittle smile. "As many of you are aware, there was an unfortunate misunderstanding involving a non-compliant vehicle parked on Mr. Peterson's property. Acting under HOA regulations, I took action to ensure community standards were upheld." Someone near the front snorted. "You mean you cut his lock?" A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Karen ignored them. "However," she continued, "it appears that certain details were miscommunicated. The vehicle in question was apparently under federal jurisdiction, and law enforcement became involved. That part, I assure you, was never my intention." The room buzzed. People whispered, others recorded on their phones. Karen's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled papers. One of the board members, an older man named Rick, who usually never said a word, finally spoke up. "Karen, you trespassed on private property and damaged personal equipment. That's not miscommunication. That's vandalism." Karen's mouth fell open. "Rick, please." "No," he interrupted firmly. "We've received an official report from the police department. It clearly states that the vehicle was authorized and that you were informed of that before you damaged the lock." Gasps filled the room. Karen tried to smile, but her lip twitched. "That's exaggerated." The officer misunderstood. Another board member, Maria, cut in. "Karen, they attached photos of you with bolt cutters. That did it." The room broke into murmurs, some trying to hide laughter. Karen's composure started to unravel. She glared at me from across the room, eyes full of venom. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "I've worked tirelessly for this neighborhood. I've enforced the rules fairly and consistently for everyone." From the back, a neighbor muttered, "Yeah, except yourself." Karen spun around. Excuse me. He stood. Last month, you parked your boat trailer overnight. That's against HOA Code 4.6. You fined me for doing the same thing last year. The room erupted again, laughter, agreement, scattered applause. Karen tried to gavel them down. That's different. I was the president. I said calmly, cutting her off. That doesn't make you above the law, Karen. The board looked at each other, clearly done with her theatrics. Finally, Rick spoke again. Karen, the legal committee has recommended disciplinary action for misconduct and abuse of authority. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your role as HOA president pending review. The room went silent for a moment, then, a collective gasp. Karen froze. Her hand hovered in midair, gripping the gavel like she could will it to stay hers. You can't do that, she shrieked. I am the HOA. Rick's voice was calm. Not anymore. Her jaw trembled. She dropped the gavel, and the hollow clatter echoed through the room. Then the whispers started. Someone clapped, then another, until half the room was applauding. A few even stood up. Karen's face turned red as she grabbed her papers and shoved them into her bag. She looked around the room, eyes darting like a cornered animal, before finally landing on me. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice shaking. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just gave her the faintest smile. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her so hard the blinds rattled. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Rick turned toward me. Mr. Peterson, on behalf of the HOA board, I want to personally apologize for everything that happened. That kind of behavior isn't representative of how we want this community to be run. Appreciated, I said simply. The room felt lighter, freer somehow. Conversation started again, laughter returned, and the tension that had choked this place for months seemed to melt away. As people filed out, a few neighbors stopped to shake my hand. Some even patted me on the back. About time someone stood up to her, one said. When I finally stepped outside, the sun had dipped low in the sky, painting the street gold. For the first time since moving in, it actually felt like home. I looked toward Karen's house. Her blinds were closed, and the SUV was gone. Guess even dictators take a day off, I muttered to myself. I started the Jeep, its engine humming softly. As I drove past the HOA office sign, I couldn't resist a grin. Because after all the threats, the fines, and the drama, it wasn't just the Jeep that stayed. It was me. And this time, the HOA couldn't do a thing about it. For a few weeks after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, quieter, almost normal. No more surprise notices taped to doors, no unauthorized plant height violations, no Karen hovering by the mailboxes with her clipboard like a hawk watching prey. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Because peace never lasts long when Karen's involved. At first, the signs were small, too small to notice if you weren't paying attention. My mailbox got knocked slightly crooked one morning. Then my security lights flickered out 2 nights in a row, like someone had tampered with them. A few days later, a mysterious anonymous complaint showed up in my mailbox accusing me of harboring unauthorized law enforcement equipment on private property. I almost laughed when I read it. The equipment was a standard tire jack and a spare radio set from the Jeep. Still, I knew exactly who sent it. Karen might have been suspended from the HOA, but she wasn't gone. She was lurking, plotting, and she wasn't going down quietly. Then one evening, I saw her again. It was late, around 9:30 p.m. The streetlights cast a soft amber glow across the neighborhood. I just stepped out to grab a package from the porch when I noticed movement near my fence line. There she was. Karen. Wearing a hoodie this time, no clipboard, no sunglasses, just that same tight, furious expression. She was standing beside my trash bins, holding her phone up like she was filming something. Karen. I called out, my voice calm but firm. She jumped, startled, then straightened her back. You're being recorded, she snapped. This property contains restricted materials, and I'm documenting it for the HOA's insurance file. I walked closer, not threateningly, just enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet my eyes. Karen, you're trespassing again. Her eyes flashed. You don't own this neighborhood. No, I said evenly, but I own this property. You step foot past that fence again, and I'll have the police involved. Again. For a moment, she looked torn, rage and panic battling on her face. Then she pointed at the Jeep parked behind me. You don't belong here. That thing doesn't belong here. This neighborhood has standards. I tilted my head. Funny. I thought it had laws too. Her nostrils flared. She turned sharply and stomped off toward her car, muttering something under her breath. As her taillights disappeared, I exhaled slowly. I'd seen that look before, the kind of quiet fury that meant she wasn't done. The next morning proved me right. When I opened my email, there it was, a formal letter from a law firm representing a concerned homeowner. The complaint alleged that I was operating a paramilitary vehicle in a residential zone and requested that I cease activities inconsistent with HOA zoning agreements. I laughed out loud. She'd actually hired a lawyer. I forwarded the email straight to Officer Daniels, the same officer who'd handled the first incident. Within an hour, he called me. Peterson, he said, his tone a mix of amusement and disbelief. We just received the same letter here at the precinct. You won't believe this. She sent it to the federal office too. She what? I asked. He chuckled. Yeah. The same Karen who tried to cut your lock is now trying to report the federal task force for zoning violations. The legal department's having a field day with it. I grinned. So what happens now? Well, he said, the department's filing a counterclaim for interference with federal operations and harassment. They're using the previous report as supporting evidence. She's dug herself a nice, deep hole. By the time the afternoon rolled around, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from one of the HOA board members, Maria. Hey, she said, sounding exhausted. You might want to know, Karen's been showing up at our office demanding reinstatement. She claims the federal complaint against her was a setup, and that you and the police are conspiring to ruin her reputation. Sounds about right, I said. How'd that go? She got escorted out, Maria replied dryly. By security. Again. That night, I saw Karen's house dark for the first time in years. No porch light, no movement, no sound. For a moment, I wondered if she'd finally realized she'd gone too far. But then, just before midnight, my phone buzzed, a notification from my security cameras. Motion detected. I tapped the live feed. There she was again. Karen. Standing by the end of my driveway, pointing her phone directly at my Jeep, muttering something I couldn't quite make out. I stepped onto my porch, turned on the floodlight, and shouted, "Smile for the cameras, Karen. They're live streaming this time." She froze. The light hit her full on. Her face went pale. Then she bolted, straight to her car, fumbling with the keys, nearly tripping in her panic. She tore out of the cul-de-sac like a bat out of hell. That was the last time I saw her in person. The next morning, Maria texted me again. Update, Karen's resigned. Officially this time. No meeting, no argument. Just an email saying she's moving out. A quiet sigh of relief escaped me. The neighborhood had its first real sunrise in months. No notes on doors, no arguments by the pool, no self-appointed citizen inspections. As I walked out to my driveway, coffee in hand, I looked at the Jeep gleaming in the morning light. It stood there, unbothered, unmoved, untouchable. And I smiled. Because for once, justice hadn't come with noise or confrontation. It came quietly, through patience, persistence, and karma doing what karma does best. Karen had fought tooth and nail to control everything and everyone around her. But in the end, she'd only destroyed her own reputation. And as her moving truck rolled down the street a few days later, the neighbors waved half-heartedly, some even cheered under their breath. I just stood by my fence, sipping my coffee, and nodded. Good riddance. Because in the end, it wasn't just a Jeep she failed to seize. It was my peace of mind. It's strange how quiet peace can feel after months of chaos. The neighborhood that once felt like a battleground now sounded like what it was always supposed to be, a home. Birds sang in the mornings again. Kids played basketball in driveways without getting warnings about noise violations. People actually waved at one another instead of pretending not to see each other. Karen's absence was like someone had lifted a weight off everyone's shoulders. The street looked the same, but the energy was different, lighter, warmer, almost healing. Even the air seemed easier to breathe. A week after she moved out, the HOA board invited me to a casual neighborhood gathering. No clipboards, no complaints, just people getting together for once. When I arrived, Maria, the acting president, greeted me with a grateful smile. "Glad you came, Peterson," she said. "Honestly, we all owe you one." I chuckled. I didn't do much. Karen just did what Karen does. Maria smirked. "Yeah, but you stood your ground. Most people didn't. You made us realize how out of hand things had gotten." We chatted a bit while kids ran around chasing bubbles. Someone had set up a barbecue, and the smell of grilled burgers filled the air. For the first time since I moved in, this neighborhood actually felt like one. Not a community ruled by fear of fines, but by laughter and small talk. I wandered over to the picnic tables, where a few neighbors waved me over. One of them, a retired firefighter named Bill, grinned and said, "So you're the guy who took down the HOA queen, huh?" I laughed. "Guess so. Though honestly, she kind of took herself down." "Still," Bill said, raising his soda can, "here's to the man who parked his Jeep, and his foot, right where it needed to be." We all laughed, and a few others joined in the impromptu toast. That night, I walked home under the glow of the streetlights, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: contentment. The Jeep sat in the driveway, spotless and proud, reflecting the lights above it. I stopped and ran my hand along the hood, the same hood that started all this. It was funny, in a way. Karen had tried to use that Jeep as a symbol of rebellion, of someone defying the HOA order. But now it stood as a symbol of freedom, proof that sometimes, standing your ground isn't about fighting back loud or angry. It's about holding your line until the truth speaks for itself. A few days later, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox, this time not from Karen, not from the HOA, but from the federal office. Inside was a short note on official letterhead: "Mr. Peterson, thank you for your cooperation and professionalism during recent neighborhood incidents. Your composure reflected well on the department. As a gesture of appreciation, please accept this recognition of service." Attached was a small commendation plaque, engraved with the task force insignia and my name. I stood there for a moment, reading it over twice. It wasn't about the recognition, it was the closure. The full circle moment. That weekend, I mounted it on my garage wall, right above my workbench. And every time I tuned up the Jeep, I'd glance at it, a reminder that doing the right thing, even quietly, matters. One evening, as I was tightening a bolt under the hood, I noticed a moving truck pulling up a few houses down, new neighbors moving into Karen's old place. A young couple and their little girl hopped out, all smiles and boxes. The man waved. "Hey, you the guy with the cool Jeep everyone keeps talking about?" I grinned. "Depends who you ask." He laughed. "Well, we're new here. Heard there used to be some drama in this neighborhood, but everyone says it's a lot friendlier now." "Yeah," I said, glancing down the quiet street, "you could say that. Things are calmer these days." As they unpacked, I looked at Karen's old house one last time. Curtains open, lights on, laughter spilling out, all the signs of a place alive again. I leaned against the Jeep and took a deep breath of that warm evening air. Sometimes, peace doesn't come when the storm ends, it comes when you finally stop giving the storm a place to live. Karen had been that storm. And now, she was gone for good. The Jeep rumbled softly as I started it, the engine's hum blending with the sounds of a neighborhood reborn. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror, at the rows of tidy houses, the waving kids, the neighbors smiling instead of glaring. And for the first time since moving there, I didn't see a battlefield. I saw home. Because sometimes, the loudest victories aren't won through shouting or revenge, but through quiet strength and patience. And in the world of HOA battles, that's the kind of win that lasts.